this Tuesday edition of Cyclone InCYders. I'm Hawn Wong, host of Cyclone. To my left, I have Taylor Mankle, KUR Sports on-air executive. Taylor, how's it going today?
I can't complain. We got a lot of good sports talk, a lot of Cyclone sports.
We do have a lot of sports to talk about. And to my right, I have Mary Rominger, ICTV hockey specialist here. Loves the game, loves the Cyclones, and we're just ready to talk some sports. So looking at this past week in ISU athletics, let's just start on Friday. We had women's soccer versus Texas. Taylor, you're at the game. Before we talk about the game in general, how's the team been doing this year as a whole?
Sure.
And just kind of explain the season so far.
Well, the season for the soccer team has really been an improvement upon last year. Last year, they were not able to score a goal in Big 12 play. This year, they've done that multiple times, including big wins that you saw on Friday. We'll get to that. They had a Big 12 win on the road against Okie State. They had some really good non-conference wins against teams like Auburn, who was ranked. That was on the road in Auburn. So this is a really improved team, but it's still a very young team. This team has a lot of room to grow. Only have 3 graduating seniors and still a very good core coming back, led by Hannah Cade on the offensive end and Lindsay Hendon in goal. This team is really just improving. They're a young team, and they just keep getting better year in and year out under Tony Minata.
Yeah, definitely. And let's talk about those seniors since it was senior night. I felt like they really came to play. We had forward Corey Willer, and then midfield Lauren Rolling. They really got in the middle of the D, caused some troubles.
Yeah.
So that defense, it was strong. Let's talk about that side. The goalie, Keeper Heaton, having a great year. Her 8th shutout of the season, which is actually a school record. Talk about her ability to shut down teams and what that does for the rest of the team, not only just on offense, just on defense, but also on offense.
Yeah, Lindsay Hendon has done very well this year in goal. As you mentioned, 8 shutouts on the season. That's an Iowa State record for clean sheets in a whole year, as you'll hear Andreas mention in his package upcoming. But this, she's just really molded herself to be the key stopper to this team. Many times this year, she has single-handedly won these games for the Cyclones or forced draws for these Cyclones. She's been a huge part to this team and gets to do that for one more year. She's only a junior right now. And as you mentioned, Corey Willer and Lauren Rolling they did have good parts of this season, including last game. Willer even assisted a little bit on the offensive end, but I think what you mentioned, the big part of those two's game is really the defensive side, especially seeing in Rolling. She's been just a massive havoc for other teams within their box for the entire season. They will be greatly missed, but they're able to continue to show their stuff here as the season comes to a close.
Yeah, and so Mary, just as soccer has a goalkeeper, so does hockey. Having such a shutdown goalie in Heaton, what does that mean as a defense, just like in soccer or just like in hockey? What does that mean for a defense to have someone in that back line, just making sure that someone's going to have your back if the defense struggles a little bit?
Exactly what you said. Reliability is key for any sports team. Defensively, they have to do their job to make the goaltender, in this case, their job a lot easier, and having that reliability back there for you, that's what wins games. And you need to have more than just a great defense to win games, but to have that to always lean back on is definitely key. So that it makes a lot of sense why they're having a lot of success right now.
Yeah, definitely. And with more on this game, our own Andreas Afar was at the game. He was able to record some stuff, talk to the coaches. We have some clips right here.
Under the moon and the bright lights, the ISU women's soccer season is wrapping up. The Cyclones are already faring better than last season with a 2-3-1 conference record and an overall record of 8-5-1. For the senior class, it was one of their last games on home turf. Graduating with her name in the record books is Corey Willer, who ranks 3rd in ISU's all-time career goal scorers with a total of 20. In the final Big 12 home game of the season, Iowa State was determined to come out on top. The match got off to a flying start. Corey Willard with the pass, and freshman Hannah Cade with a blistering outside-of-the-foot goal, her 2nd in the Big 12 this season. Shortly after, the Longhorns thought they had the equalizer, if not for the offside flag. Coach Minata urged his team to stay focused. The Cyclones then almost added another with pressure mounting on the away team. Following the halftime break, the team was determined not to give up their momentum as frustration was building for the visiting Longhorns. A short-ranged free kick was a golden opportunity, but the ball sailed over the bar. Moments later, the Cyclones got a second goal from sophomore Taylor Wagner, putting the team in a comfortable lead. A third looked close, while junior goalkeeper Lindsey Hendon was untested throughout, becoming the Iowa State record holder for most clean sheets in a season with 8. With a well-deserved win, Hannah Cade and Lindsey Hendon reflect on the goal and the record.
Sometimes if I think about it too much, then I'll miss. So I just write, and like my mind is totally clear, and then I do it, and it's so exciting. Scoring a goal is always fun.
It's huge for us to get that win and move on and be ready for the next game, and I think I owe most of the success to them. I do my job, but they do more for me in front. And I think tonight this win is big for us.
The Cyclones see out the conference with 3 away games, but Coach Manada's ladies aren't worried.
We're in a much better position to be able to move forward, and I think they're going to use that as motivation as we go on. And you know, we got tough matchups, but we're going to take it one game at a time, and Drake is the first one.
For iState News with Aaron O'Neill, I'm Andre Safar.
We were able to get a quick update into this Drake ISU game, and it looks like the game is headed into the first overtime. The score is 0-0, so hopefully Iowa State can really rally into this game. Looking forward to the Big 12 championship. This game kind of means a lot to them. Win or lose, it kind of shapes the way the path towards the championship game
For
is going.
sure. And it's a rivalry game, playing Drake at home. It is your last home game of the season. You want to go out on a bang here as Iowa State, currently tied, like Hawn said, 0-0 going into the first overtime period.
Well, we will keep track of that game as it goes on. Moving on, we had another game on Friday here at Iowa State. Cyclone Hockey battled Lindenwood Friday night in a really exciting game, not for just the test that it brought Iowa State hockey, but also just because it made history as becoming the first ACH game to be broadcasted on ESPN3. Really a good honor for a league that's maybe not as well known, but really growing in popularity. So great for them. But Lindenwood, previous national champions, beating Iowa State last year. I bet this game was just circled on Iowa State's calendar for the season. Really wanted to take revenge on Lindenwood. So before we get into this game, like we did with soccer, how did Iowa State hockey look coming into the season? I know they're undefeated, 6-0. Why are they undefeated? What makes them so strong?
Well, going into this season, they definitely had all of the elements they needed to become national championship contenders. But really what has brought them to the point where they are now, undefeated 6-0, is their defense. Defensively, the first thing that they focus on and the first element of their game plan is to let their goaltender, Derek Moser, see the puck and see every shot. And then, speaking of Moser, he is not only one of the best goalies in the league right now, but he is doing an absolutely stellar job for the Cyclones, because not only is he blocking every opportunity that the opposing team has against them, but he's remained consistent, and he's made those clutch saves. The defense for the Cyclone hockey team is so strong that Derek Moser doesn't necessarily see a lot of puck during each game, but when he does see it, he makes those clutch saves, keeps Iowa State in the game. Iowa State has definitely played up to, they've been ranked number 1 for 4 weeks in a row. I definitely see that continuing on to this week, number 5. But the thing that has continued that is what the elements that he has brought to the game. And you know, I don't see this team slowing down in any way, shape, or form. Last weekend against Lindenwood, they definitely didn't play to the level that they were capable of. Neither did Lindenwood. They were a little messy, and they didn't take advantage of every opportunity that Lindenwood gave to them when they made mistakes. But goaltender Derek Moser kept them in the game every game. First game, they won 3-0. Shutout for Moser. huge for him. He was just player skewer of the week for the Cyclone hockey team. And game 2 on Saturday night, they won 4-2. Definitely a more messy game for both teams. Iowa State fell back into playing a weaker game in the second half of the game, but they still found a way to get it done because Derek Moser is such a force in net and always keeps them in the game. So just like the soccer team, defense is key for the Cyclones right now.
Defense is definitely key. And speaking on that, for 3 weeks in a row, Iowa State has been ranked number 1, 6-0. An undefeated season is a little unlikely, just speaking on pure numbers and odds of being undefeated throughout the season. But we can talk about Iowa State keeping its number 1 ranking throughout the whole season. How confident are you that they can remain at least at the top of these rankings?
I definitely think that being ranked 5 and up throughout the remainder of the season is definitely in reach for them because of the fact that they defeated the national champions of last year, and that was their biggest kryptonite. They fell to the Lindenwood Lions 1-0 in the final game, and up to that point, that's really the team that they were struggling with, and they found a way to get it done this season. So their competition moving forward, they do face Central Oklahoma this weekend, which was a problem factor for them last season. But they only lost, I think, 9 games last season as a whole, and that says a lot to the next level that the team can bring it to the season. So honestly, going undefeated isn't the craziest thing.
Well, this is such a deep team, this Cyclone hockey team. There's so many options, both offensively and even more so on the defensive end, not just in goal when you're thinking about defense, but defensemen on this hockey team are extremely deep. There's so many options you can go with, and you see it doesn't matter what line they put out there. It's still the most successful in their conference.
Exactly. The amount of production they have and the stability they have goes from the freshmen and the new rookies that were just put on the team all the way to the seniors, and that speaks great measures to where this team is headed.
Yeah, so previewing their upcoming game against Central Oklahoma, like you said, they did struggle against them last year, but Central Oklahoma at the moment, they're struggling a little bit themselves. They're in the middle of the pack. So some people could say, since Iowa State is 6-0, this could be a trap game. If you don't know what a trap game is, it's a team going into a game, think they're going to win, taking a little bit of slack, and coming out with a loss. Now, Mankle, in any sport, a trap game is definitely something that you don't want to hear and you don't want to kind of freak out about.
Sure.
What does Iowa State need to do to just not think of this as a trap game, think of this as beating Central Oklahoma, continuing their undefeated season?
Well, I think I kind of just mentioned it. The depth of this team avoids those trap games because they have so many players that can get time in these games and that do get time in these games. They go so in depth into their bench. You cannot say everybody down the line is going to think this is a trap game because some people are going to get more playing time in this game than they have in the past, and vice versa. Some people are going to get less playing time, maybe those people that aren't as focused on this game. It's such a deep team that I think that this trap scenario for this Cyclone squad, knock on wood, won't happen this year because of how deep they are and how deeply ingrained they are into the process of being great.
Well, we will look at that Central Oklahoma game when that time comes. Let's move on to another sport here at Iowa State, volleyball versus Texas Tech. This game on Sunday, correct? It was a really
Saturday.
So the game was on Saturday, but going into Saturday, Iowa State in the past 6 games, 1-5. Not a ton of confidence knowing that the team just took, especially against Texas. It felt like they kind of dropped that game, knowing that they did come back from the drop sets. So how confident were you guys knowing Iowa State 1-5 in the past 6, coming into this game against Texas Tech, knowing Texas Tech is a test for Iowa State, even though they're kind of along the same lines in the Big 12?
No, for sure. I mean, in my experience personally, being able to color commentary a lot of these games, these home games for Iowa State, and being able to travel with the team to South Dakota, I felt extremely confident going into this game for this team because Texas Tech, they have had a struggling year. They're not necessarily one of the bigger teams in the Big 12, not near the top of the Big 12 standings by any means. This should on paper at least, be a 3-set sweep for the Cyclones, and it was. And I think that because of how successful the 6-2 has been since they implemented it. You say that Texas game was kind of a disappointment. In a way it was, but they're playing the number 2 team in the nation who has set themselves so far above the rest of the Big 12. They sweeped Kansas, who is a top 10 team in the nation. Texas is fantastic this year at volleyball. Iowa State was able to take them to 5 sets. There are little moral victories there, and considering they lost the first set in that game, but then they switched to the 6-2, and that's a different alignment for those of you who don't watch too much volleyball. 6-2 basically allows you to have 2 setters on the floor and allows you to have more hitting options on the offensive end. So they switched to this 6-2 and were able to force a set 5 against Texas. They played the 6-2 the entire South Dakota game in Vermillion, were able to sweep that one. They implemented it for once again the whole match against Texas Tech, and they really just dominated and have been very dominant with this 6-2. I think the confidence of this Cyclone team is at an all-time high with this new offense.
Definitely. And you talked about the offense. Let's look at the team defensively.
Yeah.
Last week, South Dakota, 3-0 sweep. This week, this past Saturday, Texas Tech University, 3-0 sweep. So defensively, Iowa State is kind of putting the hammer down. They're keeping games to 3 sets, sweeping their teams, and it has a lot to do with Iowa State's ability to really dig, just have their digs and their lead rows. So how big is a strength is Iowa State's ability to kind of just take away their opponent's hitting percentage, take away their kills, and especially if a team is known for that, what kind of advantage does that give for them?
It's definitely a huge advantage just because of what we just talked about with their new setup of 6-2 and how many doors that opens for them offensively. So for them to be able to back that up defensively with what you just said is the reason why they are so confident and the reason why they were not necessarily predicted, but why they had so much confidence going into the game against Texas Tech. So, I mean, defensively, what they have to back up their 6-2 setup is huge for them.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple things that really bleed into that. One is the serve receive. They've really improved on the serve receive this year, especially within that 6-2. That's one of the big problems with the 6-2. They can't get in those defensive specialists out on the floor a little longer like you can in the 5-3. But with the 6-2, they've been able to improve their serve receive, which allows for a lot more digs. Haley Hilligus is playing out of her mind currently. She subs in for Abby Phillips, who goes out with a little ankle injury, and she has just taken off, and especially in this 6-2, because in high school, Haley Hilligus was a setter, so this has allowed that transition. While playing defensive specialist and libero, she's still very competent on setting, allowing for those offensive sets to open up for this team and show even more holes for a very offensive-minded team. But the defense is going well. Grace Lazard is getting a lot better on the block. She improves week in and week out, and of course moving Samara West over to that right side has also helped her on that double block with Grace and Samara.
Yeah, like you said, Hallie, a really big leading Iowa State versus Texas Tech in digs. I think 19 total on the game. Much improvement, like you said, coming in for the injuries. But, so the past 6 sets, Iowa State 6-0.
Yeah.
You could call that flawless, but looking at the weaknesses for this Iowa State team, where do they lie and what do they have to do to improve? Although, if you're looking at the past 6 sets, flawless 6-0, where is the improvement needed to be?
I think they do have a good setup with the 6-2, and they do have a lot of factors that are in their favor, but they do need to focus on some areas of their defensive play. And I mean, Taylor talked about it a lot. Even though they went from the 5-3 to the 6-2, but there are some areas of their defense that still is considered a weakness factor.
Yeah, one area that we should bring up, blocking for Iowa State, not known as a strength, so we can definitely, so Iowa State can definitely build upon that. Although they did have a decent day versus Texas Tech, blocking 8 shots to Texas Tech's 2, was that more on the offensive focus, not allowing those blocks, or was that Iowa State knowing that their deficiencies lie in blocking and knowing that they need to step up?
They've known the whole year that blocking has been a problem, and they've really just ingrained that into practice as one of the biggest things that they have to look out for is blocking. So that being said, the 8 blocks isn't surprising against Texas Tech because Texas Tech isn't that good of a team, to be honest with you. But that being said, I think that they want a lot more on the blocking, and these last two teams don't really tell the whole story because they're two of the shorter teams that Iowa State has played as of late. I think you'll get a lot better feel of how the block is when Iowa State faces off against Baylor tomorrow at Hilton Coliseum. That'll be broadcast on ESPNU. So I think you'll get a lot better chance to see how that's going there when they play Baylor on Wednesday. It's a much taller team, but they're really kind of one player oriented on the Baylor side. But regardless, I think that is where they have to work on defensively, because at times tall teams, tall Big 12 teams like Kansas and Texas and even TCU have really exploited their height against Iowa State, and the block has not done well against those teams. But when Iowa State block has the advantage in games, they're undefeated this year.
Definitely. So speaking about Baylor, tomorrow Iowa State does have a difficult task, but luckily it is here in Ames. So last year the teams split their matches, although Baylor was able to take 4 sets compared to Iowa State's 3. Baylor is, like you said, one of the better defensive teams in the Big 12. How do you think Iowa State is looking to attack, knowing that Baylor could block very efficiently, could dig really well against the Iowa State offense? Where do you find Iowa State looks to attack and in order to take a home win?
I think obviously you got to stick with the 6-2 here. That's the main point that Christy Johnson Lynch will make going into this game. I think it's been a good transition into that 6-2, and I think that really opens up a lot of offensive options. You've obviously got Jess Shaban having another hell of a season. She will be there. She'll be an option, but you have to be able, with this 6-2, to build on others when maybe a Jess Shaban or an Alexis Conaway are not producing. That being said, you've got options like Jess, you've got Alexis Conaway, you've got Samara Weston, you've got Grace all on the front line. They will play huge parts of this game, but I think the biggest part of their game is their blocking. And it's not really against the whole Baylor team. They have a very good, I think it's left hitter, if I'm not mistaken, that they will be going to for the majority of their attack. So if Iowa State can get the double, maybe even triple block over on her for most of their kills, that will give Iowa State a great chance to win this game. If they can slow her down, Iowa State should be able to coast in this one.
Yeah, definitely an area that Iowa State needs to look at in order to change their game plan. Mary, before we head on to the break, is there anything that you think are keys to victory for Iowa State in order to beat this Baylor team?
They're definitely going to be put to the test against Baylor, like we were just talking about. They did face Texas Tech and they did have a successful game, but they executed everything that they wanted to execute, but they weren't put to the test of what they really will be facing later on in the season. So I think the key factor is being able to implement what they did with the 6-2 against Texas Tech onto Baylor. And that will be, if they can establish that and they can do that, then they will definitely, things will be a lot brighter for them in the upcoming season.
I completely agree, Mary. Well, coming up after the break, we'll talk some Cyclone football. Hopefully tomorrow, against Baylor, Iowa State volleyball can come away with another W in the win column. Make sure you stay tuned after the break. We'll discuss some Cyclone football. And welcome back to Cyclone InCYders. Before we get to Texas, ISU at Texas, we have a soccer update from Taylor Mankle.
And this is breaking news. Drake just scored a goal in the 4th overtime with, and that's actually, it looks like that might end it here within a couple minutes, but in the 4th overtime, Drake just scored the first goal of the game. Iowa State probably only has a couple minutes to respond to that here in overtime period number 2.
Well, unfortunately, that might be it for women's soccer versus Drake. We'll make sure to update you on that at the end of the show, but let's move on to the main event. Iowa State football at Texas. Since we didn't have time to talk about it last week, before this Texas game even happened, Iowa State really had some hope in their past 2 previous games, although they were losses. They were very close losses against Baylor and then also Oklahoma State. So before we even saw this Texas game, what were some of the improvements that you guys saw from this Iowa State team, knowing that their offense got better, their offensive line got better? What was their biggest improvement from the beginning of the season when they weren't even able to beat a UNI team?
I think there was improvements in every aspect of the game for this Iowa State team, and I think that was just growing as the team was growing together. And to be honest with you, this was the one game going into this Texas game that I felt confident that Iowa State was going to win. That's what happens if you believe in the Cyclones, but we'll get to that later. But regardless, just the offense was clicking on all cylinders against Baylor. I didn't like that they switched from Lanning to back to Jacob Park, back to Lanning, back to Jacob Park, back to Lanning in the Oklahoma State game after Lanning dominated that Baylor game. I thought he won that job. They did not stick the same with Oklahoma State, but through 3 quarters in Oklahoma State, they played very, very well and were able to keep up with one of the best offenses in the nation like they did the week prior against Baylor. That being said, the defense, it had places to improve, but it was much better than the beginning of the season, much better than against UNI and Iowa, and even a little bit better than against San Jose State as the competition improved. So I think everything really improved, but they just don't know how to win.
Yeah, closing games for Iowa State has been a problem, not only this season, previous years. I mean, if you're an Iowa State fan out there, you know closing games is a problem for this team. So, Mary, speaking on improvement, speaking on what Iowa State was able to do from week 1 to week 7 here, I think we're in, what have you seen so far?
So far, I'm a big believer in management and coaching. And with this new coach, Matt Campbell, I wanted to see a team with more fire and a different type of swagger and a different look overall, based on who they're being led by, and I've seen that. Based on what I saw last year to this year, I've seen a lot more confidence. I've seen a lot more hype within the locker room, within the players on the bench, on the field. I've liked what I've seen so far because they have been improving and they have been making Cyclone fans kind of guess like who's gonna, anyone can win this game, and they've put themselves in that situation. They have fallen back to old problems of not being able to stay consistent throughout the second half and kind of finish the job there, and that's something that will need to improve. I don't know if that will come with time, and while the coaching staff is maybe still trying to figure out the system, like we touched on with the quarterback situation not really being fully handled yet, but I've liked what I've seen so far, and they're definitely moving in the right direction. I think the last game kind of makes you second guess that, but overall, in the grand scheme of things, they have been improving overall, like Taylor said, and there are good things coming for this team.
I definitely agree. There are good things coming. For me, it might not have been their biggest improvement, but it's something that this Iowa State team has been getting more recognition for because they've been making more plays. It's been their special teams play. Like we know, Cole Netton, he is one of Iowa State's more prolific kickers in terms of school records and whatnot. He's only missed 1 PAT on the season, 1 extra point on the season. Some really good stats coming from him, but not only the kicking side, returning the ball.
Oh, for sure.
Nwangu has had a really good season. Although Trevor Ryan's a little banged up, he's had such a great season returning punts. And even when he's injured, Alan Lazard sometimes gets his takes at returning punts. So even though that was a really good unit from last year, it might not have been their biggest improvement. It is still an improvement from a unit that, hey, let's get its due. Iowa State may not be known for their defense.
It's definitely a strength, for sure.
Definitely a strength. I completely agree. So, looking at this Texas game, the start of the game started 6-3 going into the half, where Iowa State over their past, I think, 4 games have averaged 33 points per game. Where were any of those points during the first half?
Yeah.
I didn't see any. We saw 2 field goals. Albeit there weren't necessarily many 3-and-outs. The Iowa State offense, it wasn't as usual slow, I guess. They kept their up-tempo, but they didn't produce points, and you didn't see it in the first half.
And that's the problem. They weren't closing drives as well as they had been in the Oklahoma State game and in the Baylor game, where they were able to put it in the barn. Iowa State wasn't able really to even get in that fringe of the red zone, where they have been dominant this year. One of the best teams in the nation, believe it or not, once they enter the red zone in red zone efficiency. I think they're top 15, if I'm not mistaken, only having like 1 empty trip, and I think that came in this Texas game once they got into the red zone, able to get at least a touchdown or a field goal in those trips. That being said, I think, the defense played so well, and this was the first time where that's been the case in the offense, or at least in the last 3 weeks, that the defense have played well and the offense could not respond in the way they needed to win games.
Yeah, so we saw a flip from usual Iowa State games where it was more offensive-oriented, points are being put on the board, to this defensive style of game. My question I'm going to pose to you guys is, do you think Iowa State could have had a better chance if this game were more of a shootout where both Texas offense and Iowa State's offense were clicking? If we look back to that Baylor game that Iowa State had, it was pretty back and forth, only a 14-point lead for Iowa State. And in that game, it did look like Iowa State was a better team at points. For this 6-3 halftime game, I did not see that. I didn't see Iowa State as the better team, even though they let it have. So for you guys, as a question, would it have been different if this team were, say, 30-30 going into the third? A lot of points on the board. Would that have favored Iowa State?
I think by far it would have. I don't think there's any part of this team that can really compete as a defensive presence. I don't think the defense is there for that. I think they can have great halves, like you saw, great quarters, like you saw, great drives, like you saw against Texas, but they cannot sustain that defensive power throughout a full football game. That being said, they have and should be able to sustain an offensive Big 12 game like we saw in the San Jose State game and a little bit in the Baylor and Oklahoma State game. So I think that favors the Cyclones by far. They should know that they have to be an offensive-powered team with the defense to supplement, not the defensive-powered team with an offense to supplement.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And looking more on that offense, Iowa State saw two quarterbacks for the whole game once again. They were not able to focus on one. Neither Lanning nor Park really stepped to the plate. Although I thought one had a better game, I'll ask questions for you guys. Who had the better game on the day?
I would say Joel Lanning had the better game. It really, I despise this whole system because of confidence. There are many other factors that go into play with this, but when you mess with a player's confidence and where they feel like they have a place in the team, that's when you don't get the type of production that you need from that specific player. And I see that happening currently with both of the quarterbacks that Campbell is using. And if he can find a way to be confident in one quarterback, that will make a huge difference in how this team can progress as a whole. Because right now, when you're switching back and forth, you're not really getting to know one player, and you don't have one starting quarterback, which any football fan can agree is a key factor to have that one reliable force behind.
Yeah, and Taylor, you were nodding your head throughout the whole thing. You loved the idea that confidence plays a role in quarterback play. Speak more on that, and especially with the quarterback position being a leader for the team. Lanning's confidence and Jacobs Park's confidence. Where do those lie? I guess comparing against each other, and then compare that to their gameplay as well.
For sure. Well, first off, I totally agree with what Mary said. This should not be a two-quarterback system. I don't think this team has the talent to run a two-quarterback system. And with that being said, the confidence is key. It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter what player speech they give you. It hurts to be pulled out of a game and have somebody else put in for you, especially after you go down there, put a whole drive behind you, put it in the barn, and then you're sitting on the bench the next drive watching your backup play. Doesn't matter how great of buds you are, that hurts. After you score a touchdown, you put points on the board, you do your job, and then you're kicked to the sideline to watch as the next drive goes on. That's not a good key to confidence. That's not a good key to winning. And I think another thing to mention is this: while Jacob Park and Joel Lanning are similar quarterbacks in some ways, their throwing methods are very different. And you have to think about the receiver here. Think about the running backs. They're getting hand off the ball a little different. They're getting the throws a little different velocity, different spirals. That's something they have to adjust to. And if you're doing that every 2 series, doing that to your wide receivers and stuff, that's not going to help get cohesion within the team. That's another huge part to this. And I think the confidence of these quarterbacks, especially Jacob Parks, he's a confident guy. He's a confident guy. He thinks that he should be doing this job and can do this job very well. Joel Lanning, I think he at times lacks confidence. I think this change is doing a lot more to him than to Jacob Park. And the thing is, if you're going to put that C on Joel Lanning's chest, which they did at the beginning of the year, before anybody played any games, you got to let the man be the starting quarterback for an entire game. For an entire game. It doesn't matter if he has a bad couple of drives. every quarterback has a bad couple of drives. You can't just take him out, put in your other option, because that shows you're not confident enough in the man you decided to call this team's captain.
Yeah, and even speaking on the other side of that, if you see quarterback success from one quarterback and then you see him sat the next drive, yeah, that's definitely going to hurt.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you the best athletes doesn't even need to be quarterbacks in the world. They learn from their mistakes. They take those mistakes.
Yes.
They learn from them on the next drive, and they outperform what they did in previous, even previous plays. You're not going to see that if you're not letting a single quarterback fix the mistakes that he's made for the team, and then tell that team, my bad, I'm going to fix what I did wrong.
I agree.
It's something that Iowa State needs to internally look at for the rest of the season, if not into this bye, which we'll talk about, if not looking into this bye at what quarterback is best for the future of this team. So that's where we feel about Iowa State's offense. But let's look at the defensive side of the ball, allowing only 3 points at half for Texas. Definitely a stat that we could look at as analysts as, an improvement opposed to the previous games, allowing almost 40 points per game.
For sure.
So on the defense side of the ball, it was Texas's lowest scoring output of the whole season, not even just at half. 27 points is Texas's lowest scoring output of the season. And Iowa State, the improved D allowed that. What did you see heading into the third that just changed from the half? Why did Iowa State lose this lead?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I think you got to look at the offensive end. Granted, we're talking about defense, but the offense couldn't keep up with Texas. If you told me going in that Texas was only going to score that much, I think Iowa State would have had this game if they would have kept consistent on the offensive end with what they had the last 3 games previous. That being said, I think the defense, like you said, had a very good first half. I was very impressed by the run defense, which at times has been just abysmal this year. I think Texas probably should have, in the first half, gone after the run a little more. You saw that in the second half, and it really paid dividends. This defense, you cannot expect this defense to hold teams basically, realistically, under about 30 to 35 points per game. That's just what this defense is right now. They have a decent secondary, and they have a very rough run block. So with that being said, I really don't want to point any fingers at the defense, even though they had really a tale of 2 halves.
Definitely. And like you said, Iowa State known lack of their defense on the run, the run defense. Texas was able to gather 139 yards from their starting running back in, I think, Devin Foreman. But he ran that on 30 carries and really only had a long of 18 yards. I see that as a plus, knowing that Iowa State is kind of known for giving up their long runs. Just on the secondary side of the ball, not being able to complete the tackles. So I see it as a positive. Mary, for you, the defensive side of the ball, it showed some improvements, but what did you see in this game that we can take as positive?
It's kind of been a theme throughout this entire show that we've had. If you have the defense, you have to back it up offensively. And the defense gave the Cyclones the opportunity to take the lead on the Longhorns in the first half and to give them that kind of cushion to possibly try it out to see if they can maintain that throughout the second half of the game. But the offense wasn't there to back up what the defense brought, holding off the Longhorns to only 3 points. So overall, I think they had the potential to do something that they've been wanting to do with if the offense would have shown up more in the first half. But it's still an improvement, like you said. It's still an improvement defensively all around. There are things they have been struggling with and they haven't changed, but they do have some aspects that they can move on forward into their next games.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of their next games, Iowa State actually has a bye coming into this week. But heading into the bye, going into it 1-6, new head coach Matt Campbell, what does he tell his team to try to regain the confidence, to try to regain the locker room after a 1-6 start? I mean, I know as a player and as a fan of this team, Matt Campbell, I'd like him to come out really almost angry in a sense, come out strong, I guess, come out really strong, telling his team that they need to just gather up, I guess, nut up. Let's control this bye week and make it our own to really look to improve the team. What do you think Matt Campbell's telling the team?
I think Matt Campbell's got to be telling them a couple things. One, he wants to see a full game out of these Iowa State players. I don't think we have seen a full game. You would want to say the San Jose State game was a full game, but there were room for improvement on that game as well, as they let up 200-plus rushing yards. So I think that they need to see a full game. I think that's what the coaching staff is looking for. And on top of that, the biggest part of that game is you got to close the game. You have to put your foot on the neck and just end the game, close the door, just make sure that you cannot give up leads late in these games. Iowa State needs to learn to win and learn to play a full game.
Yeah, and I think that can be definitely done on both sides, from the coaching's perspective, mentally telling the players, lock into the fourth quarter, make sure you're into this game till the very end, but also physically into this bye week. They have a lot of time to rest some injured players. We talked about Trevor Ryan earlier, a little banged up. Kamari Conmoy in the secondary, a little banged up. Even Alan Lazard, still not 100%, a little banged up. They're headed into this bye week, looking to improve on that. Mary, same question to you. What is Coach Campbell telling this team?
I mean, Taylor talked about what he's probably telling the team right now, but if I was Coach Campbell, I would tell this team that you have displayed every aspect of the game that you need to win games in different games. So use this bye week to put all of those elements together.
It's a puzzle.
Yes, it's a puzzle. You know, they had the complete game against San Jose State. They held strong defensively in the last game, and then they've done so offensively with high-scoring games. Put that all together, stick with one quarterback and give him the confidence, and then you have the puzzle to make a successful game. So if I'm Coach Campbell, I'm telling the team, you've done it all. You've done it all already, but put it all together, and then you'll have a successful upcoming game.
You know, I definitely agree, Mary. Fitting that puzzle together could give Iowa State a victory against K-State next week after their bye. Make sure you to stay tuned next week as we preview that game, along with looking more at the Iowa State athletics that week. Also, make sure to stay tuned on Thursday as we have another edition of ISU TV Newswatch, as well as an Ames Tonight special. Thanks for watching.